There's an expression in English which is you save the best for last. It's like a de beste kommt zum Schluss. So if this is the first one, lower your expectations, because that must mean I'm the worst. So, is the future fake? Is fake the future? To begin with all of this, let's look at this video. So last year, a French fashion designer made these cars out of their handbags and put them in the streets of Paris in front of the opera. And it went crazy. It was one of the most viral videos in all of the French fashion world, and everybody kind of lost their mind. And then a couple of months later, Maybelline up in London, they put eyelashes on the underground, had it go through. They put eyelashes also on the big red buses in London, and then they installed mascara brushes, and as they went under, the eyelashes of the things were touched by the mascara. This was the most viral video in the history of Maybelline, with hundreds of millions of views. Everybody was talking about it being one of the most kind of viral stunts a fashion brand had done in a long time. But the reality is, this was the original video that I shot when I was up in Paris. I saw this lovely little, oops, let's go back. Can we go back? Up, up. So this was the original video for the French fashion bag. It was just a small car going down the street that I filmed that I thought looked cute. And then this was the one from London when I was up there, and I just filmed the metro going by. So what is all of this? This is fake out-of-home, FOH, faux. It's a whole new trend in marketing, and I want to talk about it today and talk about whether or not the future, especially with AI and everything that's happening, are we going into a world that's just going to be completely fake? We won't know what's real. Is it all just total bullshit, as we say in refined American English? So for this presentation, I'm going to break it up into 3 parts. The first part, who am I? Because even though you guys came here to hear about marketing, I just came here to talk about myself. The second part will be about the origins of fake out-of-home, and then the final part will be about the future. What do I think is going to happen with all of this? So first part, who am I? It's a great question. My name's Ian Padgham, which is a horrible name. Nobody can pronounce it. Apparently it's British, all words ending like ham, like Buckingham, Nottingham. They're British names, but nobody can say it, and I live in France, and when you say it in French, Padgham, it's the French way of saying that it's worthless. So it's a horrible personal name. Luckily, most people know me by my username, which is Origiful, which is a name that I came up with when I was 15 years old and making my first website, which was a combination of original and beautiful. But there again, nobody can spell it, and nobody can pronounce it. So I think, if nothing else, I'm proof that even if you have horrible personal branding, you can one day give a speech at ADC, so don't worry about your branding. Anyways, I'm originally from California, but after Trump was elected, I said, screw this, and I moved to France, so I now live in Bordeaux, where I'm a political refugee from my horrible country. In the beginning, I studied art history, and I wrote a 200-page paper on medieval medical manuscripts and mnemonic devices, memory techniques. So if any of you are here from out of town and you're having trouble speaking tonight, come find me. I can tell you about this, and you'll fall asleep immediately because it's the most boring subject in the world. The other problem with having an art history degree is that in America, if you have a degree in art history, you only do it if you were either born rich or you're going to marry rich, and I did neither. So after getting my degree, I realized I had no future and I was going to make no money. But the one place that you can get a job in America, if you have an art history degree, is a museum. So I went and I started working at the SF MoMA, which is one of the world's largest contemporary art museums. But I was a very low-level employee, and my job was to cut out newspaper clippings for the curators of the museum. But about that time, we had a big show about Frida Kahlo, and we discovered that people were illegally selling tickets to the museum, because in America it's capitalism and you have to pay to go see culture. We found out they were illegally selling tickets to the Frida Kahlo show on a new thing called Twitter. And since I was the lowest employee, they said, we want you to set up accounts on these new social media sites so we can see what people are doing. So I went from being the least important person at the museum to suddenly being in the New York Times because it was one of the most successful social media accounts on the West Coast, partly because Twitter was only 2 blocks away from the museum. And I don't know if any of you remember those days in like 2007, 2008, but it was a huge power shift in many companies. Up until that time, we didn't know what social media was, and the idea of having a social media manager didn't exist. And so I went from being a nobody to suddenly having all sorts of power, and it was a huge conflict of interest. And also, since museums in America are nonprofits, it means that as an employee, even though I was in the New York Times, I was living below the poverty line. But the good thing is that if you're young and you live in the Bay Area and you want to make money, there's tech companies everywhere. So I went and I got a job at Twitter. So I was one of the early Twitter employees, and at that time, there weren't many people. It was mainly just engineers, and I was kind of the quirky artist. And it was great because I had no competition. Part of my job was being the social media manager for Twitter, helping to define the voice of what we were going to do with the platform and how we could use Twitter to help people figure out what was broken with Twitter. But then in my free time, because there was a lot of free time, back in those days, it was just totally the stereotype of everything you could imagine of a tech company. There were just refrigerators filled with alcohol. We would party all the time. Celebrities would come by and smoke marijuana with us. It was crazy. But in my free time, I would go and I would draw portraits of my colleagues on whiteboards around the office. And as legend would have it, one day the CEO of Twitter and some other executives were walking out of a meeting. They saw my drawings and they said, hey, whoever that is, we should have them make videos for us to help explain what Twitter is. So I went from being, it really is a testament to kind of America where anything's possible. I was a nobody, and then all of a sudden I was the head of video marketing for Twitter. So one of my first jobs was making a video where I was trying to explain was ist Twitter, because one of the hardest markets for us to crack was the German market. We never understood why, but you guys hated it. Maybe it was because you guys realized that Twitter was going to destroy the fabric of all modern culture. But I was teaching myself After Effects, teaching myself how to animate, and it was really fun, but since I'd never made a video before, it was incredibly complicated because by the time I'd finished animating this all by myself, the engineers would come and say, oh, by the way, we've changed the UI of the product, you have to redo your video. And it was soul-crushing. It just was awful. But luckily, and get ready for it, because this next slide is the only slide in my presentation that has a special effect. Luckily, we purchased an application called, wait for it, look at that, you see that lens flare? We purchased a thing called Vine, and for those of you who don't know or don't remember, Vine was kind of the start of video social media. Up until that point, you had animated GIFs, you had YouTube, but Vine was this short platform that would play videos for 6 seconds and loop them. And for me, it was great because whereas with the other video, was ist Twitter, it would take me a month to make it. With Vine, every morning I could wake up, and when I was shaving, and also a lot younger and skinnier, I could make a 6-second video before going to work. Nobody could give me feedback. Nobody could tell me what to do. And it was pure creativity. As an artist, I loved it, and it was the start of me really enjoying kind of doing viral videos. And so I just kind of went to town. I started making all sorts of videos every morning before I would go to work. But the problem was, part of my job at Twitter was to help promote Vine. So I made the video that kind of announced, I did the product launch video for Vine. I was the person who was working with brands at that time, kind of saying like, hey, here's how you can do collaborations with the influencers, because at that time nobody had ever heard of an influencer. But I was the person who was helping brands understand how to work with people making videos. But on the other hand, some of these videos, like the one of my wife pregnant, which we called the 9-month Vine, that got like 150 million views, which was unheard of at the time in like 2013. So I was helping promote this as part of the company as an employee, but I was also kind of becoming an influencer myself. And so brands wanted to work with me, but they were going to pay Twitter to work with me, but I was an employee. Anyways, long story short, it was a huge conflict of interest, and so I had to make the decision, and I decided to leave Twitter to essentially just make Vine videos. So now it's been over a decade that I've done nothing but that. In the past, I think 11 or 12 years, I've made over 2,500, about 3,000 videos for just about every brand you can think of. So I have kind of a unique perspective in that I've worked with every car company you can think of, every shoe company, every celebrity, every kind of bank startup. I made the launch video for Airbnb's logo. I did stuff for Google. I've done stuff, you name it, the Olympics, every major sports team. I've worked with them all because these are such short-form videos that you can produce a massive amount of them. Some of them were stop motion, some of them were animation, some of them were post, some of them were comedies. But one of the problems I started running into with all of this was that
just gone through my...
Sorry, I'll take it off because there's audio. Is there any way to kill the audio on that last slide if I go back to it? I'm gonna try really quick. Let's see if we can mute that last video. Oh, we did it. So on the top, it was like videos that I would make, and then people would essentially copy my videos verbatim. So the one on the bottom is apparently a very famous German video producer who's created a whole career just of copying the stuff that I did, and it was driving me insane. The other problem I was having was I would do videos where I would go around and I would do what I called 360 postcards, and it would take me hours. I'd have to shoot hundreds of pictures, and then I'd put them into After Effects, I'd track them all, I'd put them all together, and make these like very elaborate video postcards from around the world. And then all of a sudden, Instagram just decided to make it an app so that anyone with an iPhone could do exactly what I was doing for free with no skill, and it broke my spirit. So I was confronted with this problem of not wanting to be copied and also trying to find an art form that would be mine, that would be unique. So we get to the origins of fake out-of-home. And shout out to Professor OG, who apparently made this video with Dolly. So at this time, I was also every year working for the NFL, the American football teams. First the 49ers in San Francisco, then the Vikings in Minneapolis. And one of the projects I was doing was for 20 weeks every year, from September till January, I would make these incredibly complicated stop-motion animations where I was making characters and doing them by hand, and it was like a 30-second to a minute-long video every week. The problem is I'm not a very small guy, and I have very large, bulky fingers. I'm genetically probably the worst person to be doing detailed, small animation by hand, and it was driving me insane. And so in order to solve the problem of being copied, trying to find a new art, I decided I would start learning 3D. So I taught myself 3D. I continued to do videos where I was using stop motion, but instead of animating all these little characters by hand myself, I would do the characters using 3D animation. So this is going to look really bad, because these are my first videos. But everything is shot with just an iPhone, and then I was integrating 3D characters using Cinema 4D. And it was a revolution to me. There was nothing new about this. I mean, this is essentially what they did with Jurassic Park 20 or 30 years ago, where you shoot a video and you insert 3D objects. But it was really making my life a lot easier as an animator. I mean, I could update things, I could change it without having to reshoot everything with stop motion. And I loved it. So at this time, I was already living in France. I'd moved to Bordeaux. And in Bordeaux, what you do is you drink wine all the time and you eat foie gras. It's a horrible life, but someone has to live it. And so one morning, after a night of drinking too much Bordeaux wine with my friends, I went out to buy some croissants and baguettes for our kids. And as I was walking home, I stopped to watch the metro go in front of me. And as I was watching the metro, in my still sort of inebriated state, I thought, you know what, they should just make all the tramways look like wine bottles in this stupid town. And so that I walked home with the video I made, and I replaced the tramway with a bottle of wine. And this was essentially the first of what would become fake out-of-home videos. I didn't anticipate it. It was simply supposed to be a joke. But after I posted this video, it became the most viewed video in the history of Bordeaux. And it was such a problem that the Office of Tourism actually started having to do press releases informing people that this train didn't actually exist. People were coming from Portugal. They were going to the Office of Tourism. They were going to the mayor's office saying, like, where the hell is the wine train? We came just to ride this thing. And it was at that moment, it was kind of like, oh, maybe there's something here that could be going farther. So I loved it. So it meant that every time I was just walking around town, anything I wanted to do, I could make my personal kind of crazy ideas into a reality fairly quickly, just filming with an iPhone and then animating on a MacBook Air at home. Very quick, very easy. And with my art history degree, all of the things that I'd never been able to kind of make cool and fun, I could now do. I could go up to Brussels to the Magritte Museum and then actually turn the paintings that I'd always loved into actually living works of art that I could share on social media, and introduce art history to, you know, all sorts of kids on TikTok who may not know about it. Make what I thought was cool to younger people. Or I could just make stupid dad jokes, which, like here with my family up in Paris, instead of it being the Eiffel Tower, it was the eye-filled tower. So anything for a bad pun. Or to apologize for bad puns, making kind of Valentine's Day postcards for my wife telling that I loved her, filling the Louvre with balloons in the shape of hearts. Pretty soon, brands came knocking. So this was an early example from a brand in Spain where they wanted to promote their shoe. So I just put it in 3D in the middle of the streets of Barcelona, had it explode. This was then picked up by some celebrities. So this is Angèle, who's a very famous French singer. She contacted me to make a video like this for her album where there were a whole bunch of pink roller coasters. So we installed a pink roller coaster in the metro of Paris. And that really kind of got it going off in the Paris fashion world. And then, long story short, now it's even people like Apple who are calling me to come do these sorts of videos when they have a new product launch. So kind of crazy that thinking that if you have a bad hangover in the morning, it could be the genesis of a whole new form of art. Just as a side note, it was last July, almost exactly a year ago, after I made that video that we saw in the beginning of Maybelline, that someone on Twitter, so for once Twitter doing something good in the world, tweeted and said, oh, this is like fake out-of-home. So if you don't know the term out-of-home is the English expression meaning like billboards or bus sides, things that you produce for marketing campaigns outside. This is that, but it's fake. And so that was kind of the genesis that now if you Google fake out-of-home, there are just articles from every major kind of marketing magazine around the world talking about it. So thank you, Twitter. All right, the future. And I chose this slide because in my vision of the future, we will all have sinks in our kitchens that give us pasta, because that's what the future should look like. So what's the future here? Does that mean that with the advent of AI, with a world where we can now produce anything and that we've essentially democratized the production of 3D content, does that mean that everything's going to be fake? Because let's be honest, if you wanted to actually install eyelashes on buses in London and have them go under brushes, that would be millions of dollars. And as much as I wish that Maybelline had paid me millions of dollars, that's not actually what they paid me. So there's a financial incentive to no longer do real marketing. There's a financial incentive to just do this using 3D or soon just use AI and create fake marketing stunts and then go as viral as you would have gone even if you'd done it for real. I almost got lost in my sentence there. So what's the future? Is the future fake? If I was a better storyteller and a better presenter, I would craft a big, long speech now where I would leave you on the edge of your seats until the final end where I would give you my answer and you'd all stand up and applaud, but I'm a horrible presenter, so I'm just going to spoil my own speech. No, the future isn't fake, and here are my 3 reasons why. The first, and hold on, I have a German word here that I looked up just to say it. Ertragsgesetz. Does that sound right? Anybody understand that? Diminishing returns. This is a video I did years ago for a hamburger company, and since we're in Hamburg, I figured it was appropriate. I did this video years ago, and it performed very well for the brand, but it's been done. And now when I go on Instagram, every video I see is just people taking large objects for a brand and having them float around a city somewhere. At a certain point, the joke has been told, the trick has been played, and nobody cares anymore. There's no charm left. And so I don't think that there's really any future of people just kind of doing this fake marketing because we get it now. People know that it's fake, for the most part. And so I don't think that the idea of using AI to trick people has a future because, again, whatever the word I just tried to say in German, diminishing returns, there's no real point to repeating the same joke. The second reason why I really hope it's not fake, and the thing that scares me the most, and I'm very excited to hear what people speaking later in the day about AI will say, is that as someone who has had, I think at this point, over 1 billion views on videos that I've made, and I've received literally millions of comments and messages from people, I can tell you firsthand that we as a species are not ready for AI. We are so much more gullible than we would like to believe. This video right here is a video I did a couple years ago where I was flying home from, I think, Brussels, looked out the window and I was like, oh, I'll make a video called The Valley of the Gods, where I'll put Greek gods, then Darwin, then the Hand of Liberty from the Arc de Triomphe, kind of showing, I don't know, long story. It was a little artistic work, but it's very poorly done. The shadows are bad, the tracking isn't very good, things are moving. It's not a great video. Technically, it's not very good. And yet, to this day, I still receive desperate messages from people all the time saying, I've looked all over Google Maps. I can't find this. I want to go visit it. Where is it? People will believe anything, no matter how ridiculous it is. And it frightens me that when we get to the point when generative AI comes out and we can produce anything, we can have a politician doing something horrible, we can incite political violence by making fake videos. I can tell you firsthand, people, the vast majority of people, believe whatever they see. And it scares the shit out of me because it will take only a few bad actors to manipulate this and really do a lot of bad stuff. An example of this was, so I'm from San Francisco, and even though I've been married for 20 years with 2 kids, I'm very close to the LGBTQIA+ community. Most of my friends, colleagues, family members back in San Francisco were part of that community. So every year I feel it's important to kind of support that in the month of June. So last year I made this video, which again, I think the real theme here is I only do puns. You have the Arc de Triomphe, the Arc of Triumph, and the word for rainbow in French is arc-en-ciel. So this is the arc-en-ciel de triomphe, the triumphant rainbow. So I did this to just kind of say like, hey, what a beautiful triumph that we live in a world where everyone can have the same sort of benefits and privileges that I have, and I think that's great. It was supposed to be a very positive, encouraging video, but it's also completely surreal. Like, it would be architecturally impossible to make this structure. However, this video went incredibly viral, and once it was no longer on my accounts, it got picked up by right-wing media channels, and it was shared, and the story came out that I was, a left-wing pedophile trying to groom all of French society, and I received multiple death threats. People would call me, said they were going to find me and slit my throat. It got out of control, but it was mainly because people thought that France had actually done this, even though it's completely obviously fake. So there's a huge fear in my head that I hope the world isn't fake. I hope people don't abuse this, because I can tell you, even when I'm doing things that are intentionally artistic, many people think it's true. The only example of where this can be good is in something like, in English we call it April Fools, in French it's Poisson d'Avril, and I think you guys have the same thing, April shirts or something like that. for the 1st of April, you can make a joke. And so with the Eiffel Tower this year, I made it look like there was a new bedroom that you could rent on the top of the Eiffel Tower and have a beautiful view of the city. And it was the most viewed video in the history of the Eiffel Tower. It got like 20 million views overall. They got calls from Saudi princes and Russian oligarchs, all of whom wanted to buy it. And it was funny. And for them, it was a very positive experience. But it's all about context. If you're doing things in the context, either for April Fools, or if it's because I'm known as being an artist who does these sorts of things, it's OK. But when we're intentionally duping people, I think there's a huge problem. I'll come back to that in a second. And I think that we'll stay here, sorry. I think that that's the reason why I don't think the future is fake as well. There's a story that we have in English called The Boy Who Cried Wolf, and it's the story of a little boy who's guarding his sheep. He goes to the village and he says, "There's a wolf." So everybody comes to save him, and there's no wolf. He does it a second time, there's no wolf. The third time, there really is a wolf, and he says, "Everybody, there's a wolf." And the people go, "Oh, fuck you, you're lying," and then he gets eaten by a wolf. My fear with this sort of fake marketing is that if you are a brand, if you are a celebrity, if you are whatever entity on the internet, if you are intentionally doing stuff to trick the people following you, it will have a negative effect on your engagement. People will no longer trust you, and it will be to the detriment of your brand. So the idea of using AI or using 3D CGI to trick people is just bad business. So I don't think it'll be long-term strategies for that reason as well. The final part of this, the third thing, and this is where hopefully I can be clear-headed enough to make the point of my argument, and if not, oh well. Again, this is the first speech of the day, so it's all uphill from here. The biggest problem that I have had partnering with brands is stuff like this, where a brand came to me and asked me to make a video. I produced this video, then they saw it and they said, well, we don't really like it, and so they didn't pay me. I took their logo out, I posted it myself, and the video went very viral. It was satisfying personally, but it was frustrating that the brand didn't get it. Same for this one. A brand came to me in Paris, a very famous brand, and said, we want to do something. I made this video. They said, well, this sucks. They didn't pay me, so I just took their logo out, replaced their shoes with different shoes, and this video got, I think, like 10 million views. It was really hugely successful. And the same for something like this, which is now to date the most successful video I've done this year. It got like 102 million views just on Instagram. Went all around the world, and the same thing when I'd originally presented to the brand that asked for this, they said, well, it doesn't really work, it's not like your other videos, this isn't that good. And in the end, it's the most successful video I've ever made. The problem with what I do is that I'm an artist. I'm not a creative team, I'm not a marketing agency, I'm an artist. And the reason that my videos worked, and this is where I'd like to tell you all and convince you all that I'm a modest person, but I think for the sake of this speech, it'd be easier if we all just assume I'm an egocentric, arrogant asshole. The reason I think that the stuff that I do works isn't because we're tricking people. It's not the cover of the book, it's the story inside. The reason that a lot of this worked is because it's fun. There's a story behind it. It's not the technology, it's not the tool, it's the fact that something like this is just a fun idea that I think could have worked. Oh, am I out of time?
A bit, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Anyways, I'll wrap it up then. That's great. I thought I was going too fast. It's about authenticity. The future isn't fake, it's authentic. It's not about using these tools, about using AI, about using CGI to fake people out. The future will be how do we use those tools to tell authentic stories. So my hope for the rest of the day is that we'll be talking about how we can use all of this stuff to actually do things with artists that are legitimate and cool and not just trick people. And there we go, that's it, I'm done.
Perfect, thank you very much. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.